want to tell you guys a little story. So, imagine that you're looking out at a bus stop. You see a young girl, maybe 13 years old, sitting at the bus stop by herself, late at night. And then you see a guy who's maybe in his mid-upper 20s, comes over and sits down next to her. And they strike up a conversation. And he asks her what she's doing there. She's 13 years old. Why is she here so late? And she says, well, she's run away from home. And he says, well, what's going on? Why'd you run away from home? And he listens to her story about how awful her foster home was and all the difficulties that she had there and that she just needs to leave. And he says, well, gosh, you must be hungry. I've got a bag of McDonald's here. Would you like some? I'm done with it. And she gratefully accepts it because she's starving. And so they talk some more. He hears more about her story, about her life. And then he asks the question, well, where are you staying tonight? And she says she doesn't know. He said, well, you can't stay out on the street. It's just too dangerous to stay out here on the street. You've got to come back to my place. I've got a couch you can sleep on. And she gratefully accepts. And that is how you traffic a runaway. That's exactly what they do. And the reason for that is because people who are vulnerable to be trafficked are missing key resources. They're either missing physical resources like a place to stay or food, things like that, or they're missing relational or social resources, friendship, family, that they can go to and depend on. And if they don't have those things, and you'll notice that the trafficker was offering both. He was offering food, he was offering shelter, he had a listening ear, so that he was being friendly towards her. She felt like he cared. And so he was offering all those resources. When I lived in New York City, the traffickers would go down to where the buses came in to New York from all over, and they would just wait there with their bags of McDonald's for 13-year-olds to get off the bus by themselves. That was just what happened. Most runaways who come to New York City, which for some reason they all kind of flock to cities, are talked to about sex trafficking within 24 hours. So that's just how it is. When that's how things operate. So, what if instead of the traffickers being the ones who provide these resources, what if we did? What if we would? And that's partly why we're here today, is that we're building these kits that you guys just got done putting together, and those provide some physical resources. Those are going to go into some other bags that are going to have things like a note with numbers to call to get shelter, numbers to call to get food, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, things like that. And they're also going to have the encouraging note that you wrote, that you were trying to reach out to them, trying to connect with them on a human-to-human level. And that is important, that we're offering those kinds of resources. So that's what we're trying to do tonight through the Jewish Family Services and the organization called All Worthy of Love. So let me talk a little bit broader about the different kinds of human trafficking that are out there in the world and some statistics about it. You guys got some cards, right? Can somebody read one of the stories that's on their card? Yeah, go ahead.
It's Kunfi's story. At age 14, Kunfi has been trafficked into a brothel in a decaying apartment building filled with rodents, cockroaches, and disease. She is held against her will by violent traffickers and forced into prostitution.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you've heard about human trafficking before, this is probably the kind of thing you've heard about. This is the thing that gets the most news coverage, is child sex trafficking. It's where children are somehow abducted and brought to these brothels where pedophiles come and rape them. It's awful, and it deserves to get the news that it gets because something needs to be done about it. It's the most popular, but unfortunately it's not the most common. So can you read one of the statistics off the back?
Yeah. Just anyone?
Anyone, yeah.
Human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry.
Yep, so human trafficking is the second largest criminal activity, quickly heading towards the first. And the reason for that is that the other two are weapons trafficking and drug trafficking. And the reason for that is that we have a lot of laws against weapons trafficking and drug trafficking. And if you get caught with those weapons or with those drugs or in the act of selling them, you go to jail for a long time. There's lots of fines and fees. When you get caught doing human trafficking, almost nobody goes to jail because the victims are so scared of saying anything against the trafficker because they really are afraid of them that they often won't testify. The laws aren't that good. There's some states where it wasn't even against the law until just the last couple of years. So so there's a lot of upside. You can make a lot of money. When you sell a drug one time, it's gone. You sell a gun, it's gone. You sell a person over and over and over and over again until they're dead. which isn't necessarily that long. So, but they're so cheap. It's got such a low startup cost and such high reward without hardly any penalty that if you don't have any scruples about ruining other people's lives, it's a very lucrative business investment, which is why it's growing amongst criminals worldwide. Someone have another story besides that one? Yeah.
Kumar's story. Because of a small debt incurred by a relative, Kumar has been illegally conscripted into slavery at the brick kiln. Kumar wants to play. He wants his parents. He wants to go to school, but he can't. Escaped workers are caught and publicly beaten.
Yeah, so Kumar is part of what is actually the largest group of human trafficking, and that is something that's called debt bondage. And what happens is someone makes a small loan, usually a couple $100s at the most, and they have to pay it back. But they can't pay it back because there's so much interest, because there's so many fees and hidden costs in it, that they work for free for a long time trying to pay off their debt. They never get it paid off. They pass it on to their child and maybe even their grandchild. Maybe Kumar's grandpa was the one who took out the debt. And so they just get all this free labor forever. Now, it's illegal, but most people in a lot of countries don't know that. And so they keep working and keep working. So that's debt bondage. Do you want to read one of the statistics off the back?
There are an estimated 27 million slaves in the world today.
Yeah, and then it's a huge problem. Like I was saying, because it's so lucrative, because it's so easy to get away with, it's growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, most experts, that's a statistic starting to get a little old. Most are thinking that it's more over 30 million by now, maybe even mid 30 millions at this point. So, someone have another story? Yeah.
Venkatesh's story. For 8 years, Venkatesh and his wife have been slaves at a rock quarry in South India. Though his 15-year-old daughter dreams of becoming a doctor and his 13-year-old son wants to become a politician, there is no hope. His children are forced to work with him in dangerous terrain, near large and dangerous machinery crushing rocks day after day.
Yeah. Now, this could be debt bondage again, or it might actually be forced labor, where he's being held, him and his family are being held against their will by force and forced to do work. We've talked a little bit about sex trafficking, but Kumar and Kunti. Kumar and Venkatesh are both what we would call labor trafficking. And labor trafficking makes up the large majority of human trafficking in the world, although sex trafficking is a close second, and a lot of times people are bounced back and forth between the two. Statistic on the back.
Worldwide, there are nearly 2 million children in the commercial sex trade.
Yeah, so that's 2 million people. That's a lot of people. We're out there, so you can see this is a big problem. Somebody, the last card? Yeah.
All right, Sarah's story. At age 17, Sarah's boyfriend physically abused and trafficked her into sex slavery. After authorities arrested the trafficker, she was admitted into a hospital and diagnosed with depression. She still feels dependent on her boyfriend and asks for him, clinging to a false sense of security. She doesn't feel like she belongs anymore.
Yeah, now this is an example of a woman who was in another country, was somehow brought to the U.S., and probably under false circumstances. My guess is that her boyfriend purposely tried to date her so that he could traffic her. Like he picked her up, and was nice to her and started dating her. This happens a lot, not just with people overseas, but even at middle schools where older men in their 21, 22 years old will hang around. They will look for middle schoolers who have low self-esteem, or they look for they're missing those resources, either the social resources or the physical resources, and they will start to date them and be Romeos. And then traffic them that way. It's pretty common out there today. It's probably the way that most domestic, either between the runaway situation or the Romeo situation, are the main two that traffickers use to get people pulled into trafficking. And you have a statistic.
Yeah. Approximately 16,000 foreign nationals are trafficked through the U.S. every year.
Yeah, and so either the way that Sarah was brought in by dating, or what's even more common is people know that the U.S. is the land of opportunity, and they come here because they're promised a job. So, yeah.
Do you know if out of is it 16,000? Do you know if that's mostly labor or sex trafficking?
From her statistic about, I think it's a pretty fair mix between the two. So because what will happen is they will tell them it's a good job, and then they get here and they say, oh, there was all these expenses that we didn't expect. You've got to pay us back. So it's kind of like debt bondage. They make them live in the factory or live in the fields where they're staying so they can keep an eye on them. And then if payday will come, they'll, here's your, $100 for work for this week, but you owe us $50 for taking care of you, and this much for you. And they end up with just a few dollars at the end. And so they're on this, and then there's always fees or fines for things that they did. So it's that. And the other thing is that a lot of times they want references. It's just like a regular job application. So they know where your family lives, they know where your friends live, and so if you try to leave, they say, if you try to leave, we know where your family lives, we're going to go get your sister. That's the kind of stuff they say. So then they don't leave, And that's why they're scared of them, because they know where they live, they've gotten their job application, they might even have the equivalent of their social security number, because wouldn't you put that on a job application? So it's pretty scary stuff. So, and then we got all the statistics, right? Okay, so what can you do about this? I don't know if you guys are like me, but this kind of sends me reeling. It's just, how can people be so evil? What can we be done about this? It's such a huge problem. 30-something million people out there that are in this problem. What can we do? Well, lots of good things have been happening. But here are 4 things that you can do to fight human trafficking. And it's give, act, pray, and share. So give. We're going to have a station set up in the back where you can sponsor a child through Compassion International. And we've asked them to select children who are especially vulnerable to human trafficking. And so you can know that by getting them involved in these programs, by sponsoring them into these programs, that they will not be at risk for human trafficking. That's one thing you can do. I think it's $36 a month that you can do to keep them out of trafficking. Another thing, so prevention is the cheapest and easiest way to fight human trafficking. The second thing is you can act. So that's give. There's also other organizations besides Compassion you can give to. International Justice Mission is one. There's some local groups that you hear in Michigan that you can give to that are great. That's next. So give, act. We're doing some action tonight, right? You guys already built the kits. You wrote the notes. You put them in. Those are going to get delivered to people who are vulnerable to human trafficking, homeless youth, mostly in the Detroit area. Another thing you can do is start to look for fair trade stuff. Now, fair trade's not the best solution in the world. There's lots of problems with fair trade. We could have a long conversation about that. But it's the best thing we have right now. So you can know that if it's fair trade on the label, that slavery wasn't used in it. A lot of places that we can especially, that are easy to focus that on, are chocolate, because there's a lot of child labor, child forced human trafficking labor used in harvesting cocoa. And coffee, same thing. A lot of debt bondage in coffee. So by buying something with the fair trade symbol on it, you can know that at least that wasn't produced. You can eradicate human trafficking out of at least your personal supply chain. Another thing you can do is if you have your cell phone, pull out your cell phone, put this number into it. This is the hotline for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. What happens is you call this number and you tell them what you saw. If you see something sketchy, like at a business, like a nail salon that's open at 3 a.m, or something like that, that might be a front for a brothel, you can call this number, tell them what you see. They'll ask you questions and help you figure out what. They're not going to ask you to go into the business or do anything like that. They're just going to ask you what you saw, what you thought was suspicious. And if they get 3 calls about the same nail salon, they're going to contact the local authorities and let them know that something fishy might be going on at this nail salon, and they should send somebody over there. The number is 888-3737-888. That's 888-3737-888. They're really helpful, really friendly, and they would love to have a call from you if you see something suspicious. The third thing, so give, act. I want to say the other thing you can do for action is you can get involved in the Price of Life. This fall, this October, we are going to be doing events just like this in maybe 11 or so of the dorms, the major dorms on campus. We need your help to make that happen. So consider helping with the Price of Life this fall. We're also got a lot of other stuff going on, some cool interactive art stations where people can interact with some of these stories that you guys have on these cards, a lot of other stuff that you can get involved with this October. The third thing is pray. God has a heart for justice. He cares about the poor. He cares about the vulnerable. He cares about people who are being oppressed. And so we can pray and ask that this would stop, that human trafficking would be eradicated off the face of the earth. We can pray for God's kingdom to come. And that's something that you can do. And prayer is a powerful thing and works. So I encourage you just to add that to your prayers. And then the last thing is share. You can tell your friends, you can tell your family, you can tell your social media friends all about what you learned here today. In fact, someone's going to ask, how was your day? Or how, what did you do yesterday? Tell them about this. Say, hey, did you know about the 27 million people that are being in slavery today? Isn't that crazy? And you can talk about it. So you can spread the news and make more people aware about the problem of human trafficking. So a little story of hope. All of the people on these cards were rescued out of human trafficking. The international ones were by an organization called International Justice Mission. The woman in New York was by an organization called Restore NYC, which works with people who've been trafficked internationally to New York City. And these are all Christian organizations that have gone and worked with the local authorities to bring these people out of these situations, have given them job skills, have retrained them, and now the kids are going to school. Kumar actually now owns his own brick kiln, and he's paying a fair wage to the people who work for him. There's lots of cool stuff like that. So good stuff has been happening around the world, and you can be a part of the solution if you choose to be, and I want to encourage you to do that. So thanks very much. I'll turn it back over to you guys.